Hello and welcome to this episode of Smart Talk, a Data in Motion leadership series. Joining me today is Fred Koopmans, CPO of BigPanda. Fred has a fantastic history in product management, working across companies like Citrix, Cloudera, and now BigPanda. He has a master's in computer engineering, and he's also an ex-colleague and good friend that I've worked with in the past as well. So thank you for joining us today, Fred.
Thank you, Dinesh. It's good to reunite with you.
Of course. So for folks in the audience that do not know about BigPanda, help us understand who BigPanda is. And this topic that we're going to be talking about today is about AIOps and the relevance of AIOps in the context of data in motion. So maybe help us understand what AIOps is as well.
Sure. And again, thank you for having me on the podcast. So AIOps is, concept of using AI to accelerate and improve IT operations. Now that's pretty broad, and I think different vendors define it a bit differently. So for some people, it's about being predictive, predicting the future, predicting my next outage or my next hard drive failure, that kind of a thing. For others, it's about accelerating the sort of the reactive or the responsive nature of an operations team. So, I think we're all probably aware of the massive growth of observability and APM tools over the last decade or so, and especially as applications and infrastructure has shifted to the cloud. Those tools are predominantly bought and deployed by developers, so that when something goes wrong, they can kind of log in and they have all the observability of what's going wrong, right? I can look at the logs, the metrics, traces, etc. Our definition at BigPanda of AIOps is harnessing that machine data to sort of automatically and proactively inform IT operations that, hey, there's an issue or there's a potential issue that someone should investigate. Basically, so you stop getting embarrassed by your customers calling and say, hey, did you know you're down? Because you're down right now. So it's taking that same observability data, but putting like a different kind of purpose to it. And then, you can imagine that's a lot of data. So using AI to automatically sift through all of that data and find the needles in the haystack.
Fantastic. Thank you. And in this talk series, we get excited about, things like proactive and predictive and all that kind of stuff. That's what we talk about here when it comes to real-time data. So you said observability platforms galore, and then there are APM solutions out there, and then, AIOps, kind of extending that paradigm into making it more proactive and predictive. I want to tell the audience as well as, bring up the topic of melt or metrics, events, logs, and traces, which are primarily the data streams that get injected or ingested into these kinds of platforms so that the right kind of predictions can be made about when certain systems are going to go down or when a particular issue is going to happen and so forth. So how do you handle, as a AIOps platform vendor, this kind of volume of data streams? Because we are talking about collecting data from infrastructure, cloud, containers, all different types of logs and whatnot. So when you are ingesting this level of volume across the enterprise, what are some of the challenges that you face, and how do you handle that as an AIOps vendor?
Yeah. So we kind of segment the workflow into a few different components of the stack or layers of the stack. So there's the elements that generate the raw data. So instrumenting the product, generating metrics, logs, and traces. This is the highest volume from a gigabytes kind of perspective. So that's like a first layer of the stack. Second layer of the stack then is processing those to search for kind of threshold breaches or anomalous patterns there. The third layer of the stack then is the layer where BigPanda sits that processes those pieces of information. In other words, the events. So BigPanda takes the input as the real-time events. So if something has crossed a pre-configured threshold or a predictive threshold, anomalous or otherwise, that's the event that BigPanda comes in. So the data that comes into BigPanda is typically it's a kilobyte, a couple of kilobytes per event. But our largest customer, think very large enterprises, banks, airlines, healthcare industry, our largest customers literally receive 4 million events a day. So it's just an enormous amount of information, but it's not a lot of data per piece of information. Now, as it turns out, about 99.99% in some cases of that data is duplicative, it's redundant, it's just noise. Somebody configured this threshold 10 years ago, forgot about the application, and it's not useful, it's not productive for operations. So like, our design principle is, first off, kind of like the TCP IP layer. It's like, well, like, do things at the right layer of the stack that makes the most sense. And don't send data beyond that. Like, don't send BigPanda all of your metrics, logs, and traces when you already have tools that are processing those and searching for those anomalies.
Understood. So if I were to understand what you just said, the first and the second level of the stack that you mentioned could be the players that are like, ingesting and processing all these voluminous events, logs, and traces and whatnot. But the events that get bubbled up from that, those anomalous behavior or like, any kind of specific false positives, good, false negatives, whatnot, those get, pretty much into the third layer stack, which is what BigPanda is. So do you actually like really care about how that data is collected? Like, I've seen open source type of, instrumentation methodologies like, OTel and metrics and all that kind of stuff, that could be another way of like doing that. Or, closed vendors, closed source vendors, like, the traditional observability vendors out there who are also like, ingesting all these types of data from various sources and are escalating or elevating those specific events into an AIOps solution like yours. Do you really care about like how that event comes up, or like, do you prefer or care about a specific architecture?
We don't really care. We care that it comes up and we're able to take that data as inputs. It's one of the key inputs to BigPanda. I'll talk about some other inputs here in a second, but we don't particularly care as how. As long as the customer has decent coverage and they have sort of a well-defined alert quality or quality alert definition, and they can say, hey, don't send me alert unless it has the application it's related to, the business impact of that application, the the run book that you want me to execute, so on and so forth. So we care about alert quality more than how it's originated. Now, I'll observe that my average customer has 20 to 30 different monitoring sources. Some of them have been deployed recently, but they have decades of monitoring. People are still sending us S&P traps, if you can believe it. So there's a large variety of things. So that third layer is really the aggregation and sort of the filtering layer. And I'll add one more observation, which is I do see a little bit of a trend in the market towards open telemetry, right? So kind of in the monitoring space, a shift towards standardization, open source, cost control, all kinds of things from that perspective.
Very, very cool. I mean, I've seen the same trend as well when it comes to like open telemetry. I think a lot of companies are adopting it. Vendors are like starting to support it, which makes the system and the ecosystem a lot more cooperative to work with, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's good. We just kind of assume a heterogeneous environment, and we kind of thrive on whatever it is, however you get it to me. You can literally email, S&P, API, whatever. We will standardize and turn it into a more homogeneous stream for the operations teams on the outbound side of BigPanda.
Got it. So a quick sideways conversation here on the people that are actually benefiting from something like this. You talk about these homogeneous streams that you generate, and then, for the operations folks, right? So are these operations folks typically suffering from getting these alerts on a real-time basis, or are they suffering from like, overload of like, events coming in through, or what is it that we are trying to solve for these operations folks?
All of the above. So let's say a typical customer, think about BigPanda customers, the typical IT operations teams, unless they have this AIOps platform like a BigPanda, they're going to be suffering from alert fatigue. So they may be receiving 4 million raw events. Now, they don't have 4 million actions to take on those raw events. They may have a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand at most actions to take, but sifting through sort of the raw and what's actionable is sort of the first thing. And if you go back maybe a decade or so, that scale wasn't so far out of whack. And what they had actually done is build up human, IT operations teams to manage the scale. But as the machine generated data from the observability tools has grown and grown and grown, and cloud, and CI/CD, and DevOps, like the pace of change and everything else has just overwhelmed those teams. So I think the first thing they need is like just to reduce the noise, get it down to a sane kind of human manageable level so that they're not missing things. They're always afraid they're going to miss an outage. And if you end up with a painful outage and you go back and realize my observability worked, it told me I had an issue. It told me where the issue was, but it didn't get to me because it got lost in the noise. So the first problem to solve for is, how do we help them not get that signal lost in the noise? Second thing is to help with kind of automated analysis. Like, okay, well, great. I have an issue. What can you tell me about that issue? How can you accelerate the triage in particular of that? It turns out that in an enterprise, more than half of incidents are triggered by changes. And if you think about it, it's the first thing an operator does. Like, okay, something broke. What changed? Is somebody upgrading something? Somebody doing maintenance? Did somebody push some code? Something must have changed. This worked yesterday. It's worked the last 6 months. So, well, that's a great sort of segue to the next data source for BigPanda is change events. So change tickets, outputs from CI/CD tools like Jenkins, GitHub, and Jira. As people are making changes in a continuous manner, we feed that in as another real-time data stream. And then we have to obviously do some correlation between the two, saying, hey, things are breaking exactly where things are changing. That's relevant context for that operations teams. So once you get the noise under control, you kind of do a correlation there for what's changed and sort of put that right at the fingertips that says like, hey, case A, there's an issue and the following things have changed in the exact area. I think you should start your investigation there. Or case B, the observability doesn't say anything's changed. So this is probably more of a hardware failure or something sort of external. So there aren't any changes. Don't waste your time triaging by going and searching all your change tools because, well, the AI has already automated that for you. I'll kind of add into that, which is, again, sort of like, what are you solving for? Again, think about that first line IT operator, what's going on? What changed? The next thing that they ask is, have we seen this before? And well, it turns out AI is really good at that as well. Doing a search for an incoming incident to say, have I seen an incident like this before? Maybe not in that exact same node, maybe not that exact same application, but sort of somewhere in the overall environment, and giving them that and kind of putting that right at their fingertips too. That's really useful. And it's an AI kind of requiring capability in order to do that kind of semantic search, because it's not going to come in with the exact same keywords as before, but oh yeah, we've seen an issue like that. It impacted the billing system, turned into a P1 outage. You should really prioritize this one. That's the third kind of use case.
Yeah. So that brings up actually really very important point about how quickly do these people need to know about what happened and, be able to triage that particular issue, as you said, and figure out what the root cause was, how do we solve it, and if we have seen it in the past and all that. Seems like time is of essence here, which begs the question, when you talk about those 3-layered stack kind of a model, how fresh is the data when it actually reaches you? How quickly do you get that information from the point when the issue actually occurred to the point where it is actually elevated to an AIOps platform? Like, we talk about data freshness all the time here in the series, and to me, this kind of brings up that, or begs that question of, how fresh is the data when it actually reaches you?
You hit the nail on the head. Time is money. So if you are having an outage, every second counts. We have some analyst reports estimating for the average enterprise that the cost of an outage is something like $20,000 per minute, right? So if you have a 1 hour outage, it's a lot of money. And if you can shave off, even 5, 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes from that, you save a lot of money for that organization. The reason for the costs are like varied in nature. There are sort of like revenue implications. If you are an online retailer, you're down, you're not making money. There's brand reputations. Like everybody remembers when their favorite service went down for a long time and they punish you. Your customers punish you when that happens. But there's also just the operational overhead, right? Without this proactive signal, what tends to happen is everyone kind of panics and say, shoot, we're down. Don't know how. Let's get all the smart people on a call and let's figure it out. Let's get the storage team, the networking team, the database team, the applications teams. Next thing you know, you literally have 300 people on a bridge call. Now, if this observability could have maybe 10 minutes before that, been able to identify an issue and highlight it at the right priority into the right assignment group, you could have saved those 300 people and just notified maybe the 5 people that really need to take a first look. And, it's not their issue. They can hand it off. So real time matters. This isn't like millisecond kind of real time. What tends to happen is from a threshold breach to a ticket being created, we're talking like 30 seconds to a minute, something like that. So faster is better. We're always looking for ways, sort of both outside of our platform and inside our platform, to cut that latency down as much as possible. But it's also the scenario where, when something happens, you get a network event, and then there's a database event, an application event. You get all of these signals. Basically, there's a significant issue. You're going to get more than one event. All of that kind of flows in different time sequences. We correlate it all together and create a single ticket.
Got it. Kind of want to hit on the AI response that you mentioned as well in your earlier answer, which is where you said AI helps with pattern recognition, and that's what it does well, and the semantic searches that you brought up and all that. But before we even started talking about all this AI fervor that's happening around us for the last couple of years at least, AIOps has existed as AIOps even before that. I think this particular space has always been called AIOps for a while. So how has things changed here? How have things changed from where it was known as AIOps to what is AIOps today? Has there been a shift in terms of the AI methodologies inside, or the technology itself has changed? Or have you started incorporating some of these Gen AI type of tooling inside your offerings? What has changed?
Yeah, I would say you could even kind of compartmentalize into a Gen 1 and a Gen 2 from an AI perspective. So Gen 1 of AI, let's call it the pre-ChatGPT launch, November of 2022 kind of version of things. AI in this case was about anomaly detection, intelligent correlation, compression techniques, kind of pattern recognition, these sorts of things. Turns out that, change events and monitoring events is really good at that kind of stuff. And looking at metrics and logs and traces, the AI set that was applied towards that problem were kind of perfect for those use cases. But there were a lot of things that were out of reach. So it wasn't until Gen 2 AI became available that you could start going after different kinds of use cases. The ability to quickly and at scale do a semantic search to realize that I've seen an incident that sounded a lot like this before. That really wasn't possible with Gen 1 technology. And it was generative and large language models and vector databases that sort of has made that possible. So I think we're in the Gen 2 era now. You still need the Gen 1, right? That's that proactive detection and noise reduction that tells you, hey, you're having an issue. But in terms of helping that operations teams, both those frontline folks that are doing triage, taking a quick look and deciding, is this an issue, is it not, and who would I escalate to, they can use it to read through the summary of all of that data. So a classic BigPanda ticket looks like 40 different alerts happening in different locations. Here's all the change events. Here's all the similar incidents. here you go. Now, if you're a frontline operator, that might be 10 to 20 minutes just to read the ticket. It's a lot of data that's been compressed into that. But generative allows us to summarize and say, hey, here's the TLDR. This is really important. Pay attention. Here's why. Or this is just a P3, it's not that important. And, it's just one more of this sort of storage threshold kind of issues. It's still important, but it's not urgent in the same way. So that's one unlock. Here's the other really big unlock, and this is where I see the market going over the next year or two. If I think about like during the Gen 1 era, what data sets were sort of providing the input into the AIOps platform, it was events. Monitoring events, change events, observability events, some threshold got breached, like that's the kind of the data. Now it's expanded. Those are still important, but it's expanded in Gen 2 to be words. All kinds of different words flowing from different sources, some of them real-time in nature, some of them not. I'll give you a few examples. So I'll start with the non-real-time sort of categories. So every historical ticket, after action review, post-mortem, remediation steps, run books, standard operating procedures, wikis. That's a lot of information. That's a lot of context that are buried somewhere in some operational system on how to maintain and troubleshoot and repair issues. And I'll add run books to kind of complete that list. All of those words being fed into an AIOps system unlocks a lot more context that allows you to say, yeah, we've seen this issue before. And by the way, here's how it was fixed. Here's who fixed it. Here's the after action review that we never followed up on. Like, okay, that's pretty good context. So that's category 1. Category 2 of words, it's real-time words. Like, what are people chatting on right now? Who's calling the help desk? And if the help desk is starting to get flooded with, incoming queries about something being down, or there's people on a Zoom call that are speaking over Zoom, just like we're doing now, that's being transcribed automatically through AI into words, that becomes a real-time data feed. That
also the sentiment on chats and social streams and whatnot as well, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah. You just mentioned another good one. Like, what are people chatting online out in the the metaverse? That whether it's Down Detector or other sites like that, these are other important signals. So all of these words now become possible real-time data you can bring into an AIOps platform, giving more context. Again, the goal being help people detect what's going on as quickly as possible, both proactive as quickly as possible and predictive, like, hey, we don't have an issue yet, but this is heading in the wrong direction, and then triage and remediation of that. So I would say that the Gen 2 here is a game changer for the whole industry, allowing you to connect sort of machine-generated data and human-generated data, words, coming together in the same platform.
Very cool. And I'm totally excited about some of the innovations that are going to be coming about. And let's probably end this conversation. It's been fantastic on that particular note about, as the CPO of a fantastic company like BigPanda, what is your outlook? What are some of the key trends and innovations that you're seeing in the AI app space that are bound to come in the next couple of years? With again, all this excitement around Gen AI and everybody's coming out with an innovation or two almost every day. What is it that you're excited about? What are you going to be seeing in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'll give you 2. And the first is intended to kind of ground all of us product people in reality. So I was meeting with a BigPanda customer last week, one of the largest banks in the world. And he was giving me an overview of his strategy for the next 12 months. This was ahead of me going and presenting the roadmap. By the way, our roadmap is going to be all about BigPanda's AI. And at the end of his session, I was like, hey, you didn't talk about AI. What's your AI strategy at the bank? And he says, my AI strategy is to make sure that vendors don't charge me 3x the price for delivering no additional value, because they're excited about AI. I was like, oh, okay. Well, let's make sure that our AI delivers value. So that's the first thing I want to say is, while AI is amazing from a technology perspective, if you don't find a way to connect it to provable ROI, you're not going to sell it. You're not going to be able to charge any more for it. And, I know there's a lot of, exuberance and excitement about, oh man, we're going to double our price, we're going to triple our price with all of this. I don't think that's going to last unless you can actually follow that through to say, here's exactly the benefits that you got and the ROI models and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, I had a really productive roadmap conversation with this bank, so it went well. But what we talked about is sort of how you go from using AI to triage to drive remediation. And specifically, we talked about the forthcoming BigPanda Copilot. Our project name for this is Biggie. Give me all your data. It's like a big data kind of application. So we talked about Project Biggie with them. And one of his observations, and I agree with this, is lots of vendors have copilots. And a lot of them have like unique data sets, unique use cases. So my prediction is that you're going to see a scenario where, a developer has a copilot, a frontline operator has a copilot, the help desk has a copilot. It's all been sort of uniquely customized and trained for them. And they're all going to need to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, we were joking that we are not far from the day where instead of getting those 300 people on a phone call to kind of triage what's going on, you're going to get 10 copilots on an AI call, and they're going to talk amongst themselves. They're going to argue, and they're going to sort of say, okay, go talk to Biggie. Biggie knows the answer here. None of us know. And that goes even beyond IT. Like legal is going to have copilots, et cetera. So I think the copilot era is coming, where everyone has an assistant, and it kind of mirrors, let's say, the organizational org chart, the people org chart. You're going to have a kind of a mirror image of copilots, where not only will they exist and where they add value, but they'll talk to each other too. It'll be really cool, and our AI start communicating, kind of root causing things on our behalf.
Yep. Almost like a couple of years ago, I spoke about autonomous enterprises and self-leading enterprises as kind of like the future to look forward to as, technology in this particular space emerges. And I think the way you said it about copilots coexisting, talking with each other, taking orders from one another as a organizational, org chart and so forth, I think is the future that we are all probably excited about, but at the same time a little concerned about as well. If they can make all the decisions for us and running that company and making some of those key decisions as well. But definitely exciting days ahead. Fred, thank you so much for joining us today. I think I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope the audience got like a lot of information from you about the AI space and how data in motion, real time, and all that factor into that as well. So appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Dinesh. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Big fan of the space. Been great.